hospital. Lokval and the South African Grand Prix. This time it's the Swedish driver Peter Eriksson who's squeezed out and his boat teeters on the brink of disaster. This circuit is 6,000 feet above sea level, and as water replaced the air in the tunnel of Eriksson's boat, it was only the downforce of altitude and the lack of lift which prevented a disaster. But this driver had had problems before, back in Milan in '83.
A tremendous start there, and the water undoubtedly reasonably calm at the moment. No real problems as they go away on this first lap, but still tight together as they disappear for a moment or two into spray. At 110 miles an hour, it's 6 boats align up towards the first buoy. Bertil Vik goes through into the lead. Eriksson's boat rises up there and crashes down, disintegrating into the water. They all miss him somehow or other.
This was Eriksson's first season of Grand Prix racing, and his comments afterwards gave us an insight into what goes through a driver's mind as he looks death in the face.
I thought my life was on a very short line because all the other boats were arriving to the buoy and I was one of the first. So I thought, now someone hit me, but they didn't.
I don't know exactly what he did, but he suddenly spun out and I was looking straight at him falling out of a cockpit and a propeller going round. And I swerved to miss him. Unfortunately, he caught the boat as I went through. He's a very lucky guy, he really is. There was a lot of us going into the turn buoy together. And I thought, well, I'll go round wide. But what exactly went wrong with his boat, I don't know.
Holland and the Dutch Grand Prix. Mark Wilson overtakes another driver at over 90 miles per hour. The forces are calculated in excess of 4G, and at this point Wilson has admitted in the past to blacking out. Norway. Jonathan Jones takes off. Later he confessed this to be one of the most exciting sensations he'd ever experienced in his life. If this is excitement, at what point does it turn into terror? The incident, in fact, had not been caused by wind, but by a trough of water which had travelled down the river, a wake, in fact, coming off another boat. And here Mark Wilson experiences exactly the same problems, but with a little more control 1 lap later. Bristol Docks in England, the most famous powerboat circuit anywhere in the world, providing the greatest challenge for the top drivers. The start in 1984 saw 14 boats leaving the pontoon. Once again, the start highlighting just how dangerous this stage of the race is. Mick Bridge took off in the middle of the pack, 360 degrees round, completing the whole job with a barrel roll. The boat rights itself and Bridge is out in the water. All the other boats managed to miss him, and he was extremely lucky to come away with his life. The Italian driver, Renato Molinari, now 18 times world champion, came here back in the early 70s. He looked up the course and asked the race organizer where the boats came back. It's quite simple, said Charlie Shepherd. They go up one side and they come down the other. Molinari was stunned, and the race has been a tremendous success ever since. As the sport has developed, the necessity for efficient rescue has increased. The team at the Bristol Docks has set standards which have been followed by powerboat organisers right around the world ever since. Bristol Docks, 1984. Steve Curtin, the British champion, barrel rolls his brand new carbon fibre boat. Curtin was one of a new breed of drivers, determined to drag the sport into the 1980s, using the very latest materials and the very latest techniques to give him that extra little edge over his fellow competitors. A carbon fibre boat was brought out with front and rear wings, but development failed in the end and the boat was removed from the circuit. Italian driver Guido Cappellini barrel rolls at the bottom of the Bristol Docks course. 2 years had passed by, and with it had brought a new development, the safety cell and a full race harness. Cappellini came out of an accident so similar to Curtin's, but without a scratch. Back in 1984, there was another incident which was to leave Steve Curtin convinced he was driving a boat that was trying to kill him.
As Hill approached the Cumberland Basin turn with a strong lead, he suddenly veered dramatically off course, allowing Curtin to move into first place, a position which was to be short-lived. Spectators gasped in horror as John Hill and the rescue boat rushed to Curtin's aid. Whilst he was immediately transferred to hospital, his team inspected the damage to the boat. The immensely strong carbon fibre hull sustained only minimal damage.
Bristol 84 proved to be extremely unsuccessful for the Langholms team. They'd also entered the American driver, Gene Thibodeau. He passed Gunter Schreier, lost control of the boat and took off. The following year, Schreier was coming down the same stretch of water, clipped a turnbuoy and did exactly the same as Thibodeau. As the boat made contact with the water, Schreier was dragged out underneath. Amazingly, he too survived this accident. The Bristol Dock circuit has caught an awful lot of drivers out. On the restart, it was South African Peter Lindenberg who so nearly took off coming down into the Cumberland Basin as he literally forced his way past the British driver Will Taylor. As he returned up the course through the right-hander past the SS Great Britain, scene of Steve Curtin's massive accident the year before, the front of his boat lifted and he lost control. Within inches of the dock wall, Lindenberg's boat was seen upside down floating in the water. The Osprey rescue team, now an official part of the World Series, were very, very quickly on hand. Lindenberg was pulled on board on the drop front of the boat and was taken up to the paddock. Amazingly, within half an hour, he was seen walking around the paddock again, talking to the other drivers. The replay of this accident only serves to heighten the drama. Lindenberg loses control of the boat, the propeller breaks from the surface of the water, and the Mercury engine acts like a huge pendulum, swinging the hull of the boat round 360 degrees. Out comes Lindenberg, out comes the fuel tank, and down into the docks goes the hull. Women, as well as men, compete in this sport. Fiona Brothers became the fastest woman on water and then very nearly killed herself. At Bristol in '83, she explained what had happened.
We were accelerating away from the beginning of the second heat of the Roller Truck Grand Prix National Championship, and whereas in the first heat I'd won very easily, I can't remember it unfortunately. The second heat, I didn't get a very good start. I was fifth away from the pontoon, and in the acceleration up to the first turnbuoy, which is about 400 metres away, unfortunately, I got very close to the second boat, and as we all have to converge into the first turnbuoy, we're still 200 metres away, and he started to get lifted up very high, and of course, when he goes up, the air sucked underneath him as he rose up in the air. Unfortunately, sucked me up as well, and it was very windy, not his fault. I was unlucky, so was he.
Lake Cunningham on New Providence Island for the second Bahamas Grand Prix. A classic battle had developed between two American drivers, Ken Stevenson and Bill Sebold. As they fought to get past the backmarkers, Sebold moved across in front of Stevenson. The positions had changed time and time again during the race. Someone was going to have to lose out. No one expected this. Safety cells are now being designed in the hope of protecting the driver from this kind of accident. Everyone, including Bill Sebold, was deeply shocked by Stevenson's death.
A tragedy like this obviously affects you when you go out to race next time. How do you prepare yourself mentally for that?
It's a good question. I don't think you can. Without a doubt, I won't drive as fast. You know,
It's just a tragedy that we don't like to see, even though it's an arch rival, you know. Ken was just a hell of a competitor. You know, he liked to win. So I don't know, there's just no way to prepare psychologically. I guess you just have to try to put it out of your mind, I guess.
It was December 1983 and North America lost one of its champions. Ken Stevenson died at the age of 36 for the sport he loved. He left behind him a wife and one son. Driver Bill Ormiston remembers a similar accident at Fairford in England, where he was lucky to survive.
Well, I'm quite dispassionate about it, really. I remember the incident completely. My boat started to lift. I thought for some time I could get it down again. Then I realized that when I heard the propeller leave the water and the revs run away with themselves, I realized I wasn't going to get it down again. At that point, I was more concerned with survival, so I tucked my elbows in and drew in my legs with the idea of flipping out at the top of the loop. In the event, the boat corkscrewed at the top of the loop, and the inertial forces held me into the cockpit. Consequently, I was sitting in the boat when it landed.
It was the final impact of the boat with the water that hurled Ormiston across the surface. When he eventually came to rest, he lay there motionless. He'd severely damaged his shoulder with a nerve trapped in his spine. The Osprey rescue team on hand once again with their specially developed drop front boat. This enables them to slide the driver into the front of the boat on a special stretcher. Bill Ormiston was not seen for many months at the race circuit. This then is inshore powerboat racing, competition that takes place on lakes and inland waters. There are others who choose to race on the open sea. In the world of offshore powerboat racing, the classes vary enormously, from small 1.3-litre outboard engines right up to the massive 2,000 horsepower inboards. The 1985 2-litre Offshore World Championships, and one of the biggest entry lists ever seen in this class. Drivers from right across the world had come here to contest for the crown of world champion. The risks they took were enormous. At the end of the day, it had turned out to be a three-cornered battle between Swedes, Italians and Britons. And finally, it was the British pair, Graham and Nicky Peck, in their Spears and Rolfe catamaran, who turned out to be the 1985 2-litre World Offshore Champions. Risks in the smaller classes are bad enough, but when you get up to the big Class 1 boats, not only is it risk to life and limb, but risk to the destruction of very expensive machinery. In the 1985 Cowes Torquay Cowes Classic, the cruiser Manhattan went up in smoke, the crew lucky to get away with their lives. As years have passed by recently, the speed has increased dramatically, especially for catamarans. Here, Mike and Gary Tolman are pushing their twin-hulled boat across the surface of the water at tremendous speed. And just ahead, of a Class 1 boat, Supercat. It was 1985 and the Torbay International, just off the south coast of England. Supercat lost control of her steering, cut right across in front of the monohull RHS and headed straight for Double Two Shirts. It was only very quick thinking on the part of Tim Hill and Richard Lawson that avoided disaster here. The 38-foot-long catamaran quickly slowed to a stop. The crew climbed out and opened up the engine hatches, desperate to discover exactly what had gone wrong with the boat. Since the turn of the decade, the speed at which these boats travel has increased dramatically, whereas in the late 70s, the fastest catamaran might well travel at 85 to 90 miles per hour. Now it's climbing well up above 100. At the Cowes Classic in 1985, Stefano Casiraghi discovered just what it was like to control one of these huge Class 1 monohulls in very heavy seas. Even with two V12 8-litre Lamborghini engines in the back of his boat, he just could not develop the speed to get across the tops of the waves. And it was left to Italian Renato Della Valle and the very fast monohull Cinzano in perfect trim to take the race. All over the world, men and women compete in these boats. The challenge is supremacy. The risk is making high-speed contact with water and the experience of their first shockwave.
And I blew it. It was my fault. No excuses, no nothing. My mistake.
Hello and welcome to Offshore Circuit Powerboat Racing. This week we're at Shanklin on the Isle of Wight for the fourth round of this popular series.